Have you ever desired to be like someone else? You look on at their life with envy as you become more and more dissatisfied with who you are and what your own life looks like. It can draw you towards that person as you want to become like them, or you may be put off because it's hard to be reminded of your own shortfalls. Even at Christmas, as we unwrap presents, we can fall into the trap of comparing gifts. We then fall into the trap of equating a good gift to mean that they are loved more. So if you want to get a good gift, then you need to be more like them. Well, I'm here to tell you that if you want to discover the best you, then it is only possible by letting the one who created you to have his way. You can try as much as you want, but true transformation only happens when you are transformed by the light. Join me today as we explore what it looks like when God shows up in your life, completely transforming who you are. On the 4th of September 2010, I was woken up at 4:35 a.m. when an elephant ornament gifted to me by my Nan Leah fell from the shelf and landed on my head. When I woke up abruptly, it took me a moment to register what was actually happening. Next minute, I hear something else hitting the ground. Then I click. The whole house is shaking. I leap out of the bed and run for a doorway. All I'm thinking is, find a door frame, brace yourself, and stay put until it's over. I had been in the Edgecombe earthquake when I was in primary school, and they had pumped us with information. The weeks following that experience had been full of running drills at our school and hearing songs on the radio, and even doing home scenarios with our families. I never knew how much value it had until this moment. So I gripped that door frame and I prayed. I remember looking up and saying to God, I know I'm supposed to look up and rejoice when you come, but I'm so not rejoicing right now. I was alone in a big house. The ground was shaking, it was dark, and I had no idea what else to do. All I knew was that my house was shaking like a cardboard box. Honestly, your house might seem stable, but when the earth shakes like that, it suddenly looks like it could be knocked over with a simple flick of your finger. It's not just the abrupt shaking, but it's the way the walls bend like a snake as the jolts force their way along it. As I continued to watch the cans fall from the shelves in the kitchen, cupboard doors fly open, the toilet water explode up to the ceiling, and the windows bend with each vibration. I looked like a deer stuck in headlights. My eyes were wide and my body was stiff. In the wee hours of that morning, I had no idea what the actual damage was. I couldn't see out to the other houses around me. I didn't have immediate access to news reports. I had no idea where the earthquake was centered or how deep it was. All I knew was what I could see in front of me. In between then and daylight, I received several phone calls from people checking up on me. An hour later, I heard a knock at my door. It's a couple from my church who live up the road. We sit and recount our experiences as we laugh at our reactions and share together. Slowly, as the day unfolds, we get a clearer picture of exactly what's happened and the damage it's caused. We discover that the earthquake's magnitude was 7.1 and the epicenter was only 40 kilometres west of Christchurch, 10 metres deep. At that time, it was the most damaging earthquake in New Zealand since the Hawke's Bay earthquake in 1931. The following year, we would experience another 3 significant earthquakes. In February, which was 6.3 and only 5 kilometres from Christchurch, and it actually had 185 deaths. People I knew, people I worked with were part of that 185. In June, we had another one that was 6.4, and then December, another one at 6.0. And this doesn't include all the aftershocks in between. Needless to say, It struck the city and the lives of every person involved. This series of earthquakes went on to completely transform our city to the point where it looks so different today, 13 years later. Yet this is nothing compared to how it transformed the lives of those involved. Even for someone like me who didn't lose a close family member, I still find it heart-wrenching as I recall these events. I can remember watching parents running the streets to find their children at school. I can remember the panic. I will still look for a doorway or a table the moment I feel the ground shake. We can so often feel like we are in the dark with the world shaking around us. We don't always know what our dependence on people or things or systems looks like until we can't depend on them anymore. It can take our world shaking for us to realize we need something more. We need something that cannot fail us no matter what our circumstances are. It's nice to think we have control and scary when we realize we don't have control. We can live in a bubble thinking that we have it all together and don't need anyone else. Yet there is something freeing when we realize that life isn't what we thought it was, and that's okay. When we suddenly see our need for something bigger than ourselves, when we see our need for God, and we see Him waiting for us with open arms. When our world is shaken, sometimes that's just what we need for complete transformation to occur. Let's read the Bible from Acts chapter 9, verses 1 to 9. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if they found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," he replied. "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound but did not see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind and did not eat or drink anything. This story continues to be an eliminator of excuses, and here is a bit of context to explain why. Here we have the mind-blowing testimony of Paul. His reputation was something that made followers of Jesus fearful, knowing for instigating persecution, supporting it, and participating in it. He is involved in the death of the first martyr, Stephen. So now God steps in and hits him with light, completely transforming his direction in life. What I notice here is something that was common to Saul and is for us too, that God meets us where we are. In fact, most of the time he puts himself in our path and interrupts where we're at. If you're stubborn like me, then this happens over and over again until you finally recognize that it's God, and you finally see that what He wants for you is exactly what you need in your life. I think that's a challenge in this busy world. We are all moving so fast and doing so much that we are numb to our true needs. We aren't always listening to what our inner being is saying, so we're unconsciously pushing any niggling of dissatisfaction or pulling in God's direction to the side. There's just too much to do with too little time. Yet how does that make sense? It's like we're saying that we were created by a God who wants a relationship with us, yet He failed to create enough time for us to spend with Him. We're saying that there's a fault in Earth's factory settings, yet it's our own pace that we're setting in life, a pace that is running us into the ground and further away from our God. We're always waiting for something to calm down or for the next season in life for us to have a better relationship with God. We justify not having enough time today and put a pause button on growing our faith by using excuses or promises we never keep. We say things like, "I'll have more time for God tonight when I get home. I'll just do one more job and then I'll pause and connect with God. I'll spend more time with God once I get on top of work. It's so demanding right now." Problem is, we never end up with more time that hasn't already been filled with other tasks, responsibilities, or people. And it's not like God is audibly nagging us every day like all the other demands in our life. So He is way easier to put off until later. So we carry on with our plans, our own motives, and our own habits. So God comes to us, where we are, right in the midst of whatever we are doing, and He completely disrupts our flow, all so we can see Him, see our need for Him, and experience His unwavering love for us. Every single time we pause to engage, we see our need more and more. This is where transformation takes place, in God's presence, because transformation isn't something we do ourselves. It's something God does in us. He came to this earth so this could be our reality, so He could completely transform our destiny. Christmas doesn't just mark the arrival of a baby of hope, it symbolizes the reality of a new trajectory for mankind. Jesus came to where we are when He was born on this earth. He came to where Saul was on the road to Damascus, and He comes to wherever you are right now. Jesus comes to where you are and He takes you as you are with no conditions attached. As we are means that He takes every single bit of us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. God, right back at the beginning, looked down through time and saw you on your worst day and chose to come to this earth just for you. On your worst day, God still loves you completely. When you don't even love yourself, He still loves you completely. When we don't want to be ourselves, He still loves us. There is nothing that you can ever do, there's nothing that I could ever do to make God love me any more than He does right now. And there's nothing you can do to make Him love you any less. His love is complete and whole for who you are. There are two big killers to identity today. One of them being shame. Shame makes us question who we are and tells us that we aren't worthy. We aren't worthy of love, worthy of acceptance, worthy of a second chance, or even worthy to love someone else because we are saturated in shame and even our love isn't good enough. Where guilt invites us into God's presence so we can seek reconciliation and forgiveness, shame drives us away from His presence. Shame is a wedge designed to challenge God's love. It says that God's love is conditional and that it requires something of us. It says that we cannot be a child of God because we will never be good enough. It says we are no longer a child of God when we stuff up. It points a finger at us rather than seeing the finger of God inviting us close. Shame means we can't even look at ourselves in the mirror, let alone stand in front of anyone else. Saul had every reason to question if he was good enough. There was a long list of actions that was so bad that any other judge would have written him off. Can you imagine what would have happened if he had found Jesus to be God and then was overcome with shame? This isn't the reason that God interrupted his trajectory, though. It wasn't for the purpose of shame. It was for the purpose of restoration, for the purpose of calling Saul into a relationship with him, the one whom he had been persecuting, the one who was killing those who loved him. God didn't slam Saul with light to shame him. He did it to wake him up to who he is, so he could see how much he loves him. That's exactly what God did. He literally stopped him in his tracks, revealed himself, and then saturated Saul in his grace. Anyone else would have meant that Saul was zapped on the spot. What Saul may not have realized then, and what many of us don't realize in our own experience, is that restoration is a step into relationship. It's not just a matter of turning to God and saying you're sorry, then skipping away feeling better. Turning towards God is the starting point. It's what gives God permission to begin His work in us, the work that will continue for the rest of our lives. For none of us arrive at a magical place of perfection. Sorry to spoil the bad news, but it's actually good news. If we did, in that moment, we wouldn't need Jesus anymore. All of us is a beautiful, uncomfortable, dangerous work in progress. Dangerous because we are daily becoming who we were created to be for a divine purpose. The other killer of identity is comparison. This feeds into how we see ourselves in contrast to others. Comparison also calls into question who we are, as it leans into the idea that being uniquely you isn't good enough, that there is something about someone else you need in order to be better or complete. Everyone struggles with comparison. Children, young people, adults, and even the elderly. It happens across all environments we're in too. At school, work, on the sports field, at the mall, even in our homes. There is comparison between siblings, between couples, or even in the privacy of the bathroom mirror. There is nothing like the comparison that goes on inside of us while we watch movies, look at magazines, or engage with social media. No matter where we go, it can be easy to fall into the trap of looking at someone else, then looking at ourselves, and seeing something we want to change. Comparison means we can be willing to sacrifice who we are for the perceived better identity of someone else. It can be even worse when we begin a health journey and find ourselves obsessed with the goal of who we want to be over our identity. The outward supersedes the essence of who God created you as. Comparison doesn't make any sense when we consider that even identical twins are still created to be their own person. While every culture might have a different benchmark for what they believe to be beautiful or handsome or successful, they still all say, this is what it looks like and this is what you need to do too in order for you to be considered worthy. Even though comparison can be a strong driver towards goals and achievement, it still is killing our identity. Being a better version of ourselves is always better than trying to be or look like someone else. This is the work of transformation, when God is working in us, and as we grow in our awareness of who He created us as, then the work of transformation isn't only powerful in our lives, but it can help those around us. It can seep into the lives of those we're in contact with. The catchphrase for when I was a teenager in the 90s was, I want to be like Mike. This was in reference to a successful basketball player in the NBA in America called Michael Jordan. Everyone wanted to be like Mike. There is so much power when we want to be like the best version of ourselves though. It inspires those around you when you have given yourself permission to be you and to let God transform you. This then gives other people the same permission. This solidifies your true identity of worth rather than questioning it when considering someone else becomes your benchmark. This conversion moment was a wake-up call for Saul. God revealed Himself to him, and by seeing who Jesus really was, then he was able to go on and discover who he really was, not having to measure up to others or to the rules that dictated identity, freed him to know God and to know himself with a new heart. Who you are is exactly who you're supposed to be, and no one else can take your place. Well, I'm not sure if you're an early riser when you spring out of bed, or you're a frustrated riser who drags their feet into every day and loves to stay up all night. I know my answer to this question used to be neither. I'd prefer to sleep in and have an early night. I have no idea how my dad got us out of bed during our teenage years. I definitely know that I've had him try the shock factor of whipping open the curtains and pulling the blankets off. I've also had him try those same tactics where he comes into the room and flicks on the light. All I would do was just curl up tighter and try to go back to sleep. As an adult, I've struggled over the years to try and get up early. I've tried having multiple alarms. I've tried going to bed super early. I've tried not pushing snooze by putting my phone on the other side of the bed and leaping out of bed as soon as my alarm goes off. I've even tried rewarding myself for getting up. But what helped me build a habit of getting out of bed was actually sleeping with my curtains open. Yep, I would simply go to sleep with the curtains open so my body learned how to get up as the sun got up in the morning. Granted, this doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but it has worked for me. Now I am a morning person, not a fast starting morning person, but I still get up early in the morning. Just don't ask me to go to the gym the moment I wake up. The first thing I do when I get up is walk around my house opening all the curtains and blinds. Why? Because the light helps me wake up. In this story today, God showed up as the light in a powerful way. He didn't ease Saul out of his current life. He struck him with light and woke him up so he could see the stark reality of his life and step into the possibility of a new life for Jesus. This is only possible when we are transformed by the light. You might be asking yourself, what on earth the story about Saul has to do with Christmas? Sure, there is a great light in the story and we are surrounded by twinkling lights. Sure, there is a message of hope by how God showed up and we can be actively looking for God's blessings at this time of year. It's more than that, however. It's a story of God showing up right in the path of Saul, just like he showed up right in the path of humanity when he was born. It's a story of God's saving grace as evident by his willingness to come for you and me. It's a story of complete transformation which Jesus represents for each of us. Where we are, he came then and he desires to show up and show himself to you in your life right now, where you are. All of us need God to keep showing up and shining through in our lives. All of us need for him to completely interrupt our plans so we can live out his purpose. As we are, God's intention is never to shame us, only to save us. While shame separates us from God, Jesus came to bridge the gap so we can be reconciled to God. He desires that you would see how much he loves you and that your identity is sure in him. And he sees you and loves you for who you are. Comparison is our way of saying that there is a standard and we all need to reach it to prove ourselves worthy of belonging and acceptance. But letting God show you who you are in him, this unleashes his love to do the beautiful work of transformation in you. This then inspires others to also be courageous in the same way. So this Christmas, I invite you to acknowledge the greatest gift ever given, the gift of Jesus. I also invite you to open up your heart to the possibility that God hasn't finished with you yet. How do you need God to transform your life this Christmas? More than that, are you willing to let him transform you and then use you as a gift to others? Let me pray with you. Lord, we thank you for life, and this Christmas we remember the greatest gift. And you coming into this world and interrupting the plans of humanity means that we have an opportunity to be transformed and live a better life. Please have your way, we pray, in your mighty name. Amen.